You've now seen the savagery of the Hamas terror operation. You've seen the butchery as they've slaughtered Jews in their homes, murdering mothers and fathers right in front of their children, murdering children right in front of their parents, slaughtering babies, even decapitating some of them, setting Jews on fire in their homes, in their cars, gunning down 260 Israeli Jewish young people at a music festival. You've seen the butchery, the slaughter, the savagery, the satanic nature of Hamas in recent weeks. But today, we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to look more carefully. What is Hamas? What do they want? And how far will they go to get it? Hi, this is Joel Rosenberg in Jerusalem with a YouTube exclusive for the Rosenberg Report. There's so many people are talking about Hamas this, Hamas that, but most people don't actually know much about this organization, what they want, how to go get it, whether they are accepted and loved and encouraged by others in the Arab and Muslim world. So let's do that deep dive today, right here on the Rosenberg Report. Let's start by understanding that Hamas was started in the aftermath, what was known as the first Palestinian Intifada. Okay, I was studying here in Israel. The first time I'd ever come. I arrived in August of 1987 to study for 6 months at Tel Aviv University, to meet Israelis, to meet Palestinians, to travel all over this beautiful country, what the prophet Daniel calls the beautiful land. But something cataclysmic happened in December of 1987 while I was still here, still studying, and that was the explosion that became known as the first Intifada. Intifada is an Arabic word. It means the shaking off or the uprising, okay? So what happened was Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza were enraged by feeling that they were occupied by Israel and there was just no way forward, and their leaders weren't helping them get a peace deal, they weren't getting a state, and the street just exploded. And that went on for a long time. It was very, very difficult. Israel did not see it coming. As that rage built and spread on the street, an organization in Egypt called the Muslim Brotherhood decided to open up a Palestinian chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood, the original radical Islamist terrorist organization that was started by a man named Hassan al-Banna in the early 1920s in Egypt. It became quickly outlawed in Egypt because it was a terrorist organization trying to overthrow the Egyptian government and spread radical Islamism all over Egypt and all over the region. So, as the first Intifada was cooking and the fires were spreading, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which was underground and secret because it was illegal, decided to help the Palestinians start their own chapter. And they called it the Islamic Resistance Movement. The idea started in 1987, but it was August 18th, 1988, when the Islamic Resistance Movement, which is the acronym that becomes what we know in English as Hamas, was actually formed. Now, I want to read you sections of their charter, okay? The actual document that Hamas leaders wrote and agreed to that it would explain exactly what they want. And you'll see, in the first sentences, we read this: Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. Now, where does that quote come from? In the text, it says, from the martyr, Imam Hassan al-Banna of blessed memory. Hamas starts with a quote from the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, showing the roots are the radical Islamist terrorist organization, Muslim Brotherhood. Now, in Article 2, I want to show you a quote, but let's just make it clear, right from the first sentences, from the preamble, Hamas is saying we're going to obliterate the Jewish state of Israel, right? This is the genocidal nature of Hamas is seen from the first sentences, from the first words in the Hamas Charter of 1988. And that's important for you to understand. Hamas is not an organization that is trying to achieve a two-state solution. It does not want a Palestinian state next to Israel. It wants a Palestinian state instead of Israel, okay? Hamas does not want a two-state solution. Hamas wants a final solution where all the Jews and everybody else living in Israel that isn't a radical Islamist is killed and, in their words, obliterated. Now, Article 2, quote, the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, is one of the wings of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. Okay, so they're being explicit. This is not a guess, it's not a conjecture. This is part of the Muslim Brotherhood. And they go on, the Muslim Brotherhood movement is a universal organization. Yes, it started in Egypt, but it's a universal organization which constitutes the largest Islamic movement in modern times, they say. It's characterized by its deep understanding, accurate comprehension, and its complete embrace of all Islamic concepts, of all aspects of life, culture, creed, politics, economics, education, society, justice, and judgment. The spreading of Islam, education, art, information, science, of the occult, and conversion to Islam. So they're claiming that they are the true Islam. Now, I've sat with King Abdullah in Jordan and President El-Sisi in Egypt. They have made this organization, the Muslim Brotherhood, illegal in their countries. Why? Because it's a terrorist organization. I've sat with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He made the Muslim Brotherhood illegal in Saudi Arabia. I've sat with the President of the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE. He has made the Muslim Brotherhood illegal in his country. The Bahrainis have made the Muslim Brotherhood illegal in their country. Why? Because they're a terrorist organization that wants to overturn all of these moderate Islam countries and take it over in this massive global caliphate, okay? Now, Article 7, we're going to do a quote from there. It's important that you keep seeing what they're saying in their own words. The Islamic resistance movement aspires to the realization of Allah's promise, no matter how long that should take. The Prophet, Allah bless him and grant him salvation, has said, this is an important quote, quote, the day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews. By the way, that phrase, killing the Jews, in parentheses, I didn't add that. I'm not trying to explain that. That's in the actual document, okay? When the Jew will hide behind stones and trees, and the stones and trees will say, "O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." Again, that's a quote from the Qur'an. Now, not all Muslims believe that they're supposed to accept that in the modern day, okay? I can't really parse out right now the difference between radical Islamism and Islam. But I want to make a distinction that if you talk to King Abdullah, who's a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, he has a whole team of scholars, and he himself says, that's not Islam. Yes, it said it, but that was for a very specific time, but that time is over, and now the Quran and Islam calls us to peace. I'm not here to parse that out. I'm just saying King Abdullah is a moderate. He's not looking at killing every Jew behind every tree, and he rejects that. So does President El-Sisi in Egypt and all these other leaders I talked to. That's why they've made peace with Israel. They still have strong disagreements with the Israeli government, with Netanyahu, with other elements, but they don't want to kill us. Radical Islamists do, and they say those verses from the Quran are still active and relevant. Let's go to the next section, Article 8. Allah is its target, meaning the target of what Hamas wants to achieve, meaning they're focusing on God. Allah is its target. The Prophet, meaning Muhammad, is its model. The Quran is its constitution. And jihad, meaning holy war, is its path. And death, for the sake of Allah, is the loftiest of its wishes. That's Hamas describing in its own words what it wants and what is driving them. They will kill Jews to obliterate Israel, and then eventually they'll kill Christians to take over the world, because this is not a localized movement. They consider themselves a global movement that will end up eradicating all of Judaism, all of Christianity, all of anything else other than their own brand of radical Islamism to create a global kingdom or caliphate, which they believe will then usher in the day of judgment. Let's continue. The Islamic resistance movement believes that the land of Palestine is an Islamic waqf. What does that mean? That's like a trust, consecrated for future Muslim generations until, watch for it, Judgment Day. Again, there's a lot of apocalyptic language here. It, meaning what they call Palestine, or any part of it, should not be squandered, or any part of it should not be given up. Let's stop there for a second. Why? It's important. I told you before, the Hamas movement does not want a two-state solution, right? And right there you're seeing they're not interested in a compromise. They're not interested in, we'll take this, you take that, and then we'll be good, and we can live together in peace and harmony. No. And that's important specifically in the Gaza Strip. Why? Because in 2005, then Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon made a very controversial decision. He decided there's no Israeli that wants to control the 2 million people that live in Gaza. The territory is not important to us, and we don't want to run these people's lives, and we don't want the terrorism that comes out of it. So let's just give it up. Now, every Israeli believed that we should not control Gaza, but there were many, like Benjamin Netanyahu and others, who said, well, okay, but you can't just give away the land for free, for nothing. Get a peace treaty out of the Palestinian leadership in Gaza. Let's say, we're going to give this to you, and then we get peace, and this will be the arrangements. But Sharon said, no, I'm just going to unilaterally withdraw every Israeli citizen and every Israeli soldier and come pull us out of Gaza, and then they can just have it. Sharon called this the disengagement. It's very controversial. Not about wanting to get rid of the Gaza Strip and letting people live on their own, the Palestinians. Yeah, everybody agreed on that. But how it should be done. Netanyahu argued that if you give away land for nothing, you're rewarding terrorism, and terrorists will take over, and you'll get what he called Hamastan, like Afghanistan and Pakistan. It'll be basically a Hamas protectorate or emirate. You won't have peace and moderation being encouraged and rewarded. You'll be rewarding the terrorists. And it'll seem like Israel just gave up, we're exhausted, so just take the land, whatever. Sharon said, no, look, Bibi, you don't know what you're talking about. That's why I'm the prime minister and you're not anymore. So we're just going to do this, and this will be a great gesture to the Palestinians. They'll understand, we don't want to rule your life. And the rest of the world will say, wow, you Israelis, you're doing a great thing. But so Sharon did it, and what happened? Well, it turned out Bibi was right in this case. It became a Hamastan. It became a base camp for this radical Islamist terrorism, because the way Hamas sees it is, okay, good, the Israelis got exhausted by all our terrorism, so they gave us this part of the land, but we're not content. The Gaza Strip is not occupied by Israel and hasn't been occupied since 2005, right? But Hamas is always talking about the occupation, we can slaughter you Jews because you deserve it, because you're occupying us. And we're like, how are we occupying you? We left. We gave you beachfront property right on the Mediterranean. You have trillions of cubic feet of natural gas right off your border. You could create a Palestinian paradise. Wealthy, happy, free, successful, invite tourists. You've got beautiful beaches. Don't create a terror state. Don't create a terror base camp. Create a paradise, a Palestinian paradise. But Hamas doesn't see it that way. It goes right to their charter. They're not going to give up any piece of land, which means they want Tel Aviv, they want Caesarea, they obviously want Jerusalem. They want every town, every hamlet, every section of Israel, because they believe we should be eradicated, obliterated. Now, picking up with the quote, Hamas states, neither a single Arab country, nor all Arab countries, neither any king or president, nor all the kings and presidents, neither any organization, nor all of them, be they Palestinian or Arab, possess the right to do that, meaning to give up any part of Israel. Hamas considers Jordan making peace with Israel heresy. And they want Jordan. They want to take over Jordan and remove that king and take it over. They believe that Egypt making peace with Israel in 1979, that was heresy, like fundamentally religious heresy that should be that will be judged on Judgment Day, eschatologically, but also should be that the leadership of Egypt should be overthrown. So who was leading the Arab Spring, so-called Arab Spring, in Egypt in 2011? That was the Muslim Brotherhood. It was the people that wanted Hosni Mubarak, then the president of Egypt, to be removed for corruption. But once the people went to the streets, the Muslim Brotherhood seized all that and guided it till the point where once they got rid of Mubarak, they held these quick elections, and who won? The Muslim Brotherhood. And they took over the country of Egypt, even though the Egyptian military for decades had been warning ever since Hassan al-Banna, do not let the Muslim Brotherhood out of the box, or they will burn the country down. And of course, the Muslim Brotherhood started to burn the country down, the country of Egypt. And so what happened? Then General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who was the chief of staff of the Egyptian military, and then he was actually the defense minister at that time, he saw the millions and millions, 20 million Egyptians out on the streets demonstrating against the Muslim Brotherhood, and he decided the Muslim Brotherhood, this is the moment to remove them. And he did, and now he's the president. So they're not kidding. The Muslim Brotherhood is not kidding. They want to overthrow governments, and they did in Egypt. Fortunately, they were overthrown, but they believe it's a fundamental heresy, the worst type of crime for any Arab leader to give up any bit of what they call Palestine. Let's continue. Palestine is an Islamic waqf, a trust, meaning it's entrusted to them to run. It's consecrated for Muslim generations until Judgment Day. And this being so, who could claim to have the right to represent Muslim generations until Judgment Day? So again, they're saying this is not just a tactical move. They believe this is about what God, Allah, wants, and they're talking in apocalyptic terms, in eschatological terms. They're talking about their end times, that they're going to fight until the end of days, until the day of judgment. And they continue. Initiatives and so-called peaceful solutions and international conferences are in contradiction to the principles of the Islamic resistance movement of Hamas. Abusing any part of Palestine, they say, is abuse directed against part of religion, against Islam. Nationalism of the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, is part of the religion, they say. Its members have been fed on that. For the sake of hoisting the banner of Allah over their homeland, they fight. Allah will be prominent, but most people do not know. So Hamas leadership feels like it's their job to expand the spread of Islam and destroy Israel. There's one more article in the Hamas original charter, its covenant from 1988, that it's really important that you hear. It comes from Article 34. Let me quote part of it. Palestine, it says, is the navel of the globe and the crossroad of the continents. Okay, stop there for a second. That's interesting, because what Hamas is saying is that they think that this Holy Land region is the navel, or we might say in English, the belly button of the earth. Why is that important? Because it's exactly what the Bible says. Of course, the Bible said it several thousand years before the Prophet Muhammad said it or implied it, and then certainly, centuries before the Hamas leadership wrote it. Where does this come from? Well, it starts in Ezekiel chapter 5, verse 5, where the Hebrew prophet Ezekiel, writing 2,500 years ago, almost, wrote this. He says, God has set Jerusalem at the center of the nations and all the other nations around it. This is the verse, Ezekiel 5, verse 5, where I get the term epicenter, that this country, Israel, is the epicenter of God's plan and purpose for the world, and that Jerusalem is the epicenter of Israel, and that the Temple Mount, right behind me, is the epicenter of Jerusalem. So sort of concentric circles. It starts with the Temple Mount, it goes to Jerusalem, it goes to Israel, and the rest of the world. And again, that reinforces this idea that from God's perspective, the United States is not the center of the universe. Russia is not the center of the universe. China is not the center of the universe. Israel is the center of God's universe. It's the country he chose. Jews are the people that he chose. Doesn't mean he doesn't love everybody else. He does. We know that throughout the scriptures, including John 3:16, for God so loved the world. right? He loves everybody, but he has a unique and special plan for Israel and the Jewish people. That's why Satan hates us. That's why Satan is warring against us. But God has chosen Israel to be the belly button, the center, the navel of all his plan and purposes. And everything else is set around Israel, Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount. What's interesting to me is I think that, this is a point that God makes in the Bible, but it's a point that Satan knows as well. And so he has taken this idea and said, essentially through Hamas and their charter, this land is, and this city, Jerusalem, which Arabs call Al-Quds, it is the center. It is the belly button. It is the navel of the earth, but not for the Jews. Okay? That's what Hamas is saying. Let's continue. Since the dawn of history, Palestine, the Holy Land, what we call Israel, because it is Israel, has been the target of expansionists. The prophet, they're referring to Muhammad, Allah bless him and grant him salvation, had himself pointed to this fact in the noble hadith, one of the writings of Muhammad during his time, in which he called on his honorable companion, Mada ben Jabal, saying, O Ma'at, Allah throw open before you, when I'm gone, Syria, from Al-Arish to the Euphrates. Okay, Al-Arish, that's a place in Egypt. So basically from Egypt to the Euphrates, covering all of Syria, all of that territory, this expansive territory, should be a radical Islamist caliphate or kingdom, Hamas believes. Quote, its men, women, and slaves will stay firmly there in this epicenter region until the day of judgment. Whoever of you should choose one of the Syrian shores or the Holy Land, he will be in constant struggle till the day of judgment. It's important for you to understand what Hamas is, who they are, what they want, and how far they'll go to get it. What we've seen from the first words in the original Hamas charter of 1988 is that Hamas is a genocidal organization. Okay? It wants all of this territory, and it will obliterate Israel, the Jews, the Christians, anybody that they consider an infidel, including Muslims who don't agree with them. That's why they're willing to kill Palestinians. That's why they're willing to fire rockets. More than 450 of them already in the first 2 weeks of the war have not fallen on Israel, but have fallen on Palestinians. That's why they fire rockets and they malfunction and they fall on a Palestinian hospital, killing hundreds, wounding many, but then they blame it on the Jews. Except Israel didn't bomb that hospital. We would never bomb a hospital. Hamas and its allies do that. And they don't care, because anybody that gets in their way is a problem. And they will kill, they will commit jihad, what they call holy war. It's not holy, but it is war. This is their mission. And it's important that you understand, not only is it a genocidal mission to wipe everybody out other than them in this land, but then they want to go global. What they're doing here is just a microcosm of their plan to take over the entire world. This is the center, but they want to commit atrocities to slaughter Jews and Christians and anyone else they consider infidel, certainly atheists, agnostics, people of other religions. That's the stated mission of the Hamas leadership right from the beginning. And what's their end game? It's the end times. They're going to do this until Judgment Day. Why? Because they believe that God, whom they call Allah, is going to judge them. If they kill a lot of Jews and Christians, they hope that they will go to heaven. But they don't know it. This is a very interesting element, and I want to close with this thought. There's nowhere in the Qur'an that gives Muslims an assurance of salvation. There are things you're supposed to do, right? Islam, the word itself means submission. So you're supposed to submit as a Muslim to all the things that are said in the Qur'an. Then there are other sayings and supposed sayings of Muhammad, whom they consider their prophet, that are written down by other people, other disciples of Muhammad, and those are called the hadith, and the sort of extra scriptural writings, as it were. Sort of like there's the Bible, and then the Jews have what's called the Talmud. So many Jews consider it very holy and almost on par with Scripture, but it's not actually in the Bible. But if you read all of it, and I've talked to so many Muslim scholars and leaders, and what's interesting is they don't actually have any way to have assurance of salvation. Now, radical Islamists have pointed out that in the Qur'an and the Hadith, the closest description of how you can be absolutely sure you're going to go to paradise, to heaven, when you die, is to be a martyr in this holy war known as jihad against the infidels, against Jews, Christians, and others. That's why they're so motivated, because they believe that the only way you can be really, really sure, or as close to sure as you can be that you're going to go to heaven when you die, not hell, is to give up your life to slaughter others in jihad. And some radical Islamist leaders over the years have even written and spoken and said, you can also save your family and let them go to heaven if you die as a martyr waging jihad against Jews, Christians, and infidels. This is the only possible way that a Muslim thinks that he or she can go to heaven when they die. And we just read it a moment ago. Remember right there at the end when it says they're mentioning Muhammad, the prophet, and they say, you know, may God bless with salvation. They're not even sure in Islam whether Muhammad, their founder, went to heaven. So that's why they pray for it. They hope that he went to heaven, but they're not even sure if the founder of Islam went to heaven. You need to understand this, because you need to understand that not every Muslim thinks this. I did a book a number of years ago called Inside the Revolution, and it's a 500-page book. I think it's out of print right now, but I talked to scholars and experts and former jihadists from Afghanistan to Morocco. And I went to Iraq 4 times and did a lot of research. The point is, in the grand scheme of about 1.7 or 1.8 billion Muslims, only about 7 to 10% are radical Islamists. Most Muslims don't believe you have to blow yourself up or slaughter Jews or Christians. They don't believe that. But 7 to 10% do. And 10%, let's say, of 1.8 billion is 180 million people. And Hamas definitely finds themselves in that 180 million. They don't have 180 million people. I don't mean that. What I'm saying is they're part of a small subset. And in that subset, they believe you have to die as a martyr in jihad to be saved, to go to heaven and not go to hell and burn forever. And they're focused, as you heard over and over again, on Judgment Day. And as we wrap up, I just have to say that it's important for you to understand who Hamas is, what motivates them, and they're not going to stop because they believe their very salvation is on the line. They want to be sent to heaven by Allah when they get to Judgment Day. Well, so do I. But the Bible lays out a very different plan. What the Bible speaks of, and that's why it's called the gospel. The New Testament describes it as the good news. In Greek, gospel, it means good news. And what does it say? It doesn't say you have to die slaughtering others in order to go to heaven. It says that Jesus died on the cross right here in this city, that he took all of the punishment that you deserve, that I deserve, for every sin we ever committed, past, present, and future. He took it on himself, and he died so that you don't have to. Now, you may physically die, of course, but you won't go to hell if you've received the free gift of salvation that Jesus offers by his death and his resurrection. That happened in this city. And that's what, among other things, but that's the central piece. Hamas is motivated by a desire to be saved, to go to heaven and not go to hell. I'm motivated to go to heaven. But the Bible lays out a totally different plan. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him, in Jesus as the true Messiah that fulfills all the prophecies, shall not perish, go to hell forever and ever with no way of escape, but shall be saved. but shall have everlasting life. That's the hope that the Bible offers, not the sadness and the tragedy that Hamas offers. This is Joel Rosenberg in Jerusalem for this YouTube exclusive for the Rosenberg Report.